want to bring in former NATO Supreme Allied Commander General Wesley Clark now, who is with me from Little Rock in Arkansas. Good to see you again, sir. There is increasing evidence that while Russia is pounding Ukrainian cities and making some advances, they, at the same time, they appear to be having some real trouble in the field in terms of logistics and resupply and so on. How do you think that is impacting their battle plan?
I think the Russian forces are having a great deal of difficulty providing resupply, regrouping, reorganizing. The trafficability has been bad for the last week and a half in the north. In the south, they're making better progress, but they don't have the mass. They don't have the organization or the logistics even in the south to keep the pressure up and do the kind of campaign that I'm sure that the Russian military must have promised Mr. Putin. And Ukrainian resistance has been tough, and our resupplies thus far are getting in to the Ukrainian forces. So I think the Russians are in for a tough time. In the north, of course, they'd like to bring their heavy artillery in closer to Kyiv to put it under greater artillery bombardment, but they simply can't get it there because the Ukrainians are going forth. They're disrupting the columns. They're taking out individual vehicles. They've captured a number of vehicles that they've turned against the Russians. So it's a real fist fight on the outskirts of Kyiv. That's 12, 15, 20 miles out from the center of the city. And they want to close in much closer than that to use their heaviest weapons.
Yeah, the Ukrainians being very nimble, sort of striking and hitting individual targets and moving on, which seems to be very smart. Vladimir Putin, as you know, he's not the type to back down or even look like he's backing down. What are the risks when a man of that mindset feels cornered or feels that he might suffer at home because of the war not going to plan?
Well, we don't know. He's not actually backing down at this stage. What he's actually doing is by doing these negotiations and offering humanitarian corridors, he's basically distracting us. He's stalling. He's putting Zelensky under pressure. He'd like President Zelensky to fold and say, oh, okay, you've killed enough people. Okay, you can have my country. President Zelensky is not likely to do that. And so what Putin is doing is he's buying time. Offering these humanitarian corridors is going to be coughed up in some future war crimes trial. And he's going to say, I gave them a chance to leave and they wouldn't leave. And these kinds of arguments will play out. But one thing about him, he's watching us very closely.
Yeah, you're right. And when we look at what is going on the battlefield and the shelling that we're seeing, I was speaking yesterday to a war crimes expert, and we spoke about the chances of Vladimir Putin himself being indicted. Normally a difficult thing to do when you've got to trace culpability for specific incidents to a leader. But this expert said Putin's actually making it easy for prosecutors with his own public comments, laying out his capability. Do you think he could be indicted?
Right. Well, it is going to, there is evidence that's going to be collected. The fighting is tough, but there's a lot of video. This is not like 1942 or 44 where nobody can really record what's happening. Everybody's recording what's happening and it's coming out. It does have to be a symbol, but it will cause real trouble. In the meantime, NATO has to do what's necessary, not NATO, but the individual members of NATO have to do what's necessary to help the Ukrainians stay in the fight. That's the key. While sanctions are escalated and Putin's put under more pressure at home.
Yeah, if it comes to it, do you have confidence the Ukrainians who hold the advantage of being inside the capital, not the attackers? Do you think they can hold Kyiv? What preparations would they have made to defend and repel an entry?
Well, they've had several days now to fortify Kyiv. They didn't start early, and there was a lot of concern at first, but they repulsed the early efforts to sort of jump in and seize it by surprise. There's no surprise now. So there are multiple lines of defense, no doubt, in Kyiv. And there are weapons distributed, and people will fight. They'll block the major avenues of approach, despite artillery fire, rocket fire, whatever comes in. If the Russian forces get closer, though, there'll be an awful lot of heavy fire put on Kyiv before the ground forces of the Russians try to close in again. They learned a lesson.
Yeah, that is the great fear. If that happens, you can only imagine what the civilian casualties could be. General Wesley Clark, always a pleasure. Thanks for the analysis.